to the Connect the Dots podcast. Jeffrey Klein has conversations with a diverse array of successful people, sharing their stories to educate, inspire, and entertain. Here is your host, Jeffrey.
My guest today is Dr. Hannah McLane, a physician, psychoanalyst, and entrepreneur. She is the founder of Sound Mind Institute, a nationwide psychedelic facilitator training and research initiative aimed at bringing ethics, equity, and innovation to the psychedelic ecosystem. Dr. Hannah conducts research on cognitive diversity, psychedelic science, ethics, PTSD, and emerging alternative therapies for mental health issues. She attended McGill University and holds graduate degrees from Temple University, Brown University, and Harvard School of Public Health. She attended residencies in neurology and occupational and environmental medicine, and completed a fellowship in patient safety at the VA hospital in Philadelphia. She also completed a 5-year psychoanalytic training program and considers herself a relational psychoanalyst. Please welcome Dr. Hannah.
Thank you so much.
That's quite a background. So we're going to go a little before then. I like to start at the beginning. So where were you born and what did your parents do for a living?
So I was born in New Hampshire, rural New Hampshire, Plymouth. So it's like central New Hampshire in the White Mountains. Grew up was born in a town of a few hundred people at my house. My parents were very much hippies and had goats and back to the earthers is what my mom called it. And let's see. So interestingly, they started out both as high school biology teachers and then went into real estate. My dad has dyslexia like I do, and I think he didn't like having a boss. He wanted to start his own thing. So he was in the 80s when the bubble burst. They were basically giving away. I mean, they were run down, dilapidated houses, but they were kind of free almost, So we fixed them up together as a family, from when I was in elementary school to end of high school. So I can clean a mean bathroom if you need it. Really good.
So that's a pretty interesting background. Interestingly, my father-in-law, who's a very successful real estate investor developer, is also dyslexic. And in some ways, I think that's almost a superpower in some ways. I think it's a challenge, but there's something about those who find a different way of thinking about things that I've always found fascinating, especially for entrepreneurs.
I like to tell people that it's it's a superpower from force compensatory strategies. You're not born with a superpower, you have to create them because you're bad at certain things. You have to get better at other things,
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like when one of your senses is lost, you end up becoming
totally
heightened in those others. So in your rural New Hampshire environment, fixing up houses, as a kid, did you ever have a sense of what you wanted to be when you grew up? Did you have any thoughts on I want to be this?
I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian for a while. Well, first I wanted to be the Easter Bunny, which in fact, I think it was almost like my imaginary friend that I thought I was. So I would put on this my mom says that it was, she thinks it was trauma related that I saw an Easter Bunny suit person deliver flowers to the neighbor and then take off his head on the way out. And I was oh my God. So then I was trying to replace the fantasy of the Easter Bunny being alive. But I for legit, for months would dress up as the Easter Bunny and then say I was Hippity the Easter Bunny. And it freaked out my family so much they actually had to hide the costume.
Where is that costume again?
Yeah. Actually, I have it now. My mom's kept it and I have it. And I'm oh, my childhood that you took away. So yeah, after that, I think I wanted to be a veterinarian for a while. I would say maybe 3rd grade through 8th grade. I was very into animal rights. Again, saw a pig being roasted at a fair and then freaked out and was I'm never eating meat again. This was Hannah as a 3rd grader. And my parents were no, we don't do that. And I was well, I do that. So I went to the library and started, my mom said, you'll never grow to be tall. I'm now 6 feet tall, but you'll never grow. And I said, okay, I'm going to go do research. So I researched what vitamins my body might need. And then I promptly signed up for lots of animal rights paraphernalia, and I'd go into McDonald's and put meat is murder on the bottom of the salt and stuff. I just something else. Got my whole school to sign a Gillette petition because they tested on animals then. They probably still do in 8th grade, the whole school, principal and all. Yeah.
So it's clear to me that you were an independent spirit growing up. But I'm curious, was there any, other role models from where you're coming up that you looked up to that may have given you ideas about, hey, you can do things a different way?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. I feel like I've had a lot of role models through my like later elementary school years. I'm trying to think of earlier years. I think my parents are like actually really cool. I'm now realizing my dad just got into ayahuasca and he's like the coolest guy ever now. But they've always been very cool. Just they kind of do their own thing, and it's very much like they don't really do capitalism. The like the pillows that are on the like the throw pillows on the couch are the same ones that were there when I was a kid. It's not that they don't have money to replace them. They just like believe in reusing things. And they grow things in the garden, and they like half the time they're eating just things that grew in the garden. They're canning it. It's very, and I think as a kid I didn't realize you actually have to purposely do that you don't just fall into that. And I think I kind of took that for granted when I was a kid. I had a math teacher in 8th grade that I think was really cool. Mr. Underwood, he kind of embodied like he kind of protected the space around me asking a lot of questions, because I was always a person who would like ask so many questions that like I'd delay recess because I'd be like, wait, I didn't understand. They're like, oh my god, this lady just like, let's go play. I'm like, oh, but like that math equation, yeah. And he was a football coach, and for 8th graders, but 8th grade boys, I mean, that's a serious job. And he was kind of known as being mean. Like he would like lock them in a closet to punish, he's a little scary to the boys, but and so maybe he was doing a little like overprotection of women, or of girls, but he'd be like, no, wait a minute, let Hannah ask her question. And because they were afraid of him, I could ask all the questions I wanted. And I was like, this guy's awesome. And I think he knew, I think he knew I am dyslexic, so I had more questions than other people. And it's interesting, I went back and sat in his classroom like a few years ago so I was like, what was that? And he was still doing it, it's like really interesting. It was like a magic that no one else noticed. And I was just like, this is a really big deal that you're like protecting the space and the curiosity of people that need extra help, and like making sure no one bullies them.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then how did you so veterinarian, and then eventually you kind of went into the field of medicine. What kind of drew you into, that field?
Yeah, there's a lot of different versions of that story, because it's like there's a lot of events that happened. I think it started when I backpacked around Asia when I was 18. I went to China to learn Mandarin. Precocious child I was like, I'm doing, and my parents like, what? They've never left New England, so I went to Brazil when I was 15 for a year as an exchange student. No one had ever left I don't think anyone had ever left New Hampshire, but I was like, we have German exchange students, so I must be able to go somewhere. And they're like, no, we don't think so. You can't go anywhere. And I was like, no, I definitely can. So I like wrote to the program, said, ended up in Brazil for a year. And then I think that impacted me a lot. I was getting in trouble as a high school student. I was like switching signs around to hotels with my I feel like it was like did you see the movie Jackass like 10 years ago or something? I feel like those were my friends in high school. They were just like, so I got arrested trying to steal an orange barrel from the highway, just like stupid shit. As a teenager, dyed my hair a different color every day. My parents had to pick me up from the police station a couple times for like trying to steal lip balm, that kind of thing. So I was like, you know what, I gotta go. I gotta go somewhere. I was getting straight A's, but just so bored that I just went to Brazil, I saw poverty. I think in a way that was real. It was there. I lived with a very poor family that like my friend invited me to stay with her family for the last 3 months, and they didn't even really have money for food, and they were still sharing it with me. And I was like, I just can't even understand this level of generosity. And then went to Asia to study Mandarin, and ended up just like backpacking around. You start traveling into southern China. I was like on a break from my Mandarin studies, and you just like, I intercepted the backpacking circuit in like 1999. It was 1999. and it's like southern China, people are like, oh, go you meet some Germans or Israelis are like, keep going, go into Laos, go into Thailand, and you're in Singapore, and then you're like in India. So they're just like, okay. And in Nepal, people kept handing me their like kids and being like, can you help my kid? They need an antibiotic. And I was like, I was like an 18-year-old. I was like, I don't know. No, like I'm not a doctor, but I guess I could be a doctor, I guess if that's what people need of me. So that was I started thinking about that. And I met this lady, Sabriye Timberkin, who she started a blind school. She's German. She started a blind school in Tibet, invented the Tibetan Braille script, and like gathered up all the blind Tibetan kids and started this school. It was really cool. And I asked her, I was like, here's my list of 10 things that I could be in the future. Which one do you think is most useful? And it was like university professor, writer, artist, bossa nova player, like guitar player. I love it. Doctor. And she said, I would pick doctor because none of the kids in this school were born blind, not one. It was all infection, exposure to the sun, dust, not, they didn't have access to antibiotics. So then I was like, okay, I'll do it. And that was the beginning of that plan. So I called my parents from this like internet cafe in Nepal. And I was like, I figured out what I want to do. And they're like, what? We can't hear you. I'm like, I want to be a doctor. And they're like, what? Hello? What did you just say? Took me a lot of years, but and went sort of off the trail and back on and off the path. But I eventually ended up back there. Yeah.
And then you went into speech pathology before you went into kind of the psychedelic science. Is that
inaccurate?
How did that path from kind of more traditional to, I guess, alternative, at least in some sense, someone would see it that way?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what really happened is I wanted to be a doctor, and then I went to McGill, and McGill only let the Quebecois people do pre-med. Don't know why. You couldn't do it from international, so I couldn't do pre-med. So I was like, okay, I didn't do pre-med. And my parents, they just thought it was totally crazy. They're like, you don't want to go med school. It's like a million years. Like, do something practical. You love language, do that. And I was like, okay. So I shadowed a speech pathologist. It's a cool profession. I like it a lot. I was like, okay, this makes sense. Got a full scholarship to Temple. Because I couldn't figure out like financially how it would be feasible for me to go to med school. And then just kept, just like, it's like this bug, it's like this bug in your ear that's like, you gotta go. So I was like, oh man, a year into that, I ended up going to Cuba to a thing called the Cuba AIDS Project. And it was basically a bunch of doctors going there to learn about how they dealt with the AIDS epidemic, which was, there's a lot of like human rights violations with their management, but it's still like very interesting to hear from people about how they basically like tracked every single case and got rid of it. But they would like force people into sanatoriums once they were diagnosed. It was like really sad. But so I was basically I was able to go to Cuba under Castro because I was translating Spanish for the doctors. And that really, I think that was the final thing that just sold me, that I was like, this is the position I want to be in. I could see like people being with a bunch of doctors, how much people just automatically trusted you. And I was like, you can just jump into what's actually going on with someone. And that was like, I was like, I have to do this. And the speech pathology people were like, you got a scholarship, now you're going off to med school. I'm like, I'm sorry, I have to do it. But the speech pathology education, it has been very helpful with everything that I'm doing, actually. It like helps with communication and strokes and yeah.
How do we get from medicine to psychedelic science? Where's the...
Yeah, so that's the part I think that personal stuff kind of comes in a little bit. My story up until like maybe 6 months ago is that I love neurology. I loved like brain and working with stroke patients. And I went to med school, and then med school brought me into like, I kept wanting to go towards the brain and neurology. I ended up in neurology, and all I did was just like hone in on the PTSD that was everywhere. So in a hospital like the University of Pennsylvania, maybe about a third of the patients coming in with complaints that look like neurological are actually psychosomatic. So the only way to help the person is actually talk about their trauma. So they'll come in with like a numb leg or, pseudo seizures, or what we call non-epileptic seizures now, but there's nothing going on in the brain that's causing the seizure in a like electrical way. but they're still having them, and it's based like more than half of those people I think have childhood sexual trauma. So I just like was really good at working with those patients, and when I did my psychiatry rotation, the running joke was like, someone came in with conversion disorder and they're just like, give Hannah 3 hours and she'll get them discharged, even though they've been here for like a week, you know? And I go in and I just say like, what's actually going on? And like, how do you feel? And how's your life? And they like, is it possible is your life really stressed and your body's telling you need to like take care of yourself? If you ask the right questions, people, even if it's unconscious, because it's usually not conscious, even if it's unconscious, people can get at what's actually going on if you give them the like container to express themselves. And I think and then I went to this SOAP conference, which is a psychedelic conference in Pittsburgh in 2018, I think it was 2019. And they were showing videos of MDMA treatments, and I was like, this is it, this is how we're going to fix that problem. So I beelined it to Rick Doblin, and I was like, I'm Hannah McLane and I am dropping everything, I'm doing whatever you need. And he was like, geez, okay, nice to meet you. So I did. But I think that the personal story is that my dad had childhood sexual trauma, which I didn't actually know, I guess, until I was in med school, but I didn't know the extent of it and he's given me permission to share, but he started to do plant medicine in the last 6 months, and he's recovered the memory of the trauma. He's forgiven the perpetrator within the medicine journey. He was able to like realize that's the way he can like actually live a full life. And then he's like actually getting back the first 10 years of his childhood memories, because he had the sexual trauma at age 10, and then I didn't know he had blocked out age 0 to 10. That can happen. It's like you kind of take the thing, hide it, and then like all the stuff around it gets hidden. And so until like a month ago, I didn't know that my dad didn't have memories from the first 10 years of his life. So I was like, oh, this is why I was doing this all along. It's like we're always trying to, help those closest to us. And I didn't even know that was a motivator. So I was like, oh, I can retire now. And I have 85 people I'm training in the psychedelic training program. And they're like, oh no, don't retire. But really, it's like, I feel like in some ways my job is done.
What? So yeah. I was curious when I was reading about, the fact that you're using psychedelics, that I think there's still a big stigma with them. And so what do you find the biggest challenge in kind of convincing people that there are really good benefits to using psychedelic therapy to treat these mental illnesses?
I feel like the stigma is quickly disappearing. Like we have almost 2,000 people on our wait list at our psychedelic clinic in Philly. I think there is some extra work you have to do with BIPOC communities, even though a third of our waitlist is BIPOC people. There's still like additional barriers because of the war on drugs to address.
I'm sorry, what's BIPOC?
Oh, like Black, Indigenous, and people of color.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, I think when I started getting into it, I guess like in 2018, 2019, when I was really like, this is what I'm doing with my career, there was definitely some judgment from other doctors, especially like people at the VA and at UPenn. They're like, what are you doing with your career? Like, you could have been a real person and you're just throwing it out the window. And I was like, you talk to me in 5 years. Now they're all like texting me, can I get treatment? Can my patient get treatment? Like, how do you learn more about this thing? The psychoanalysts, I think, have a very purist view of like, you don't need psychedelics, you only need this one modality. But there were just like last month, there were 5 articles in the psychoanalytic literature about psychedelics, which is a big deal. I feel like that of all the people in the world, I think they're the hardest to convince, because they really believe this is the complete, the approach. And I think psychoanalysts have the best, like the most like ready to go skill set to be a psychedelic therapist of anyone, because they know how to interpret dreams. They know how to like take the like fantasies and visions seriously. They really do. And so if you just say like, treat this like a dream, done. They know how to do all the integration. It's only if someone's writing it off as not a real experience or not meaningful.
And what about, so I think, as a person who's not familiar with it, and others will think, well, when you think about psychedelic drugs, if you're not in a environment that's controlled, that there's a risk of serious problems and abuse. Do you have any of those kinds of concerns? And you find that you need to have a certain process and system in place to make it effective?
Yeah, totally, 100%. I mean, that's why there's a lot of ketamine clinics that just use ketamine as a medication. It's essentially like used as a long-acting antidepressant. How we're using it is we're opening this window of opportunity to look into thoughts and dreams and unconscious memories, and like really helping people dig into what's going on rather than just have a antidepressant effect. You also get the antidepressant effect, but it seems that the approach with facilitated sessions creates longer lasting effects. Ketamine can be abused. That's why we're very, very careful if we ever send it home with someone, and we track it very closely, like every single lozenge. There's a lot of at-home use of ketamine right now that frankly makes me very nervous, because people can start using it in different ways. They might not even realize that, so if you do like once a week or once every 10 days, do a journey, that's fine. You can do that till the end of time. That's not addiction. But when people start doing like, oh, smaller doses, I can do daily, and then they need a little bit more, and then suddenly someone's addicted and they have a whole pile of ketamine from a at-home ketamine company, that is a problem, and could be on par with the opioid epidemic if it continues that way. We have never had any addiction issues with ketamine because we track it really closely. If you create this container and you're sitting with someone, we have never had someone like go look for it. It feels like a very weird thing to do. It seems totally crazy that you would look for this thing, because it feels like such a specific experience you're having in the clinic.
Yeah, I've heard
things like psilocybin. It's like you can't really get addicted to that because it would be a lot of work to get addicted. Like even people microdosing, it's a lot of work. What it does is make things like more apparent that are happening in your life, and it's kind of like you get truth, and it's like sometimes that's hard. And larger doses, it's like you really have to be ready for them. You have to treat it with care. So I don't worry about the other psychedelics. LSD, same thing. Ayahuasca, like, oh my God, imagine an addiction to ayahuasca. That would be like the most masochistic thing you could do. And MDMA, I think in the underground, sometimes people do way too many journeys, even though they're facilitated, and that can do very strange things to your serotonin levels in your brain. I don't know if I'd call that addiction. I think it can be like addiction to the cycle. It's like physiologic versus psychological addiction are kind of different, but it is really important. I think there has been in history an importance to like solo experiences and vision quests, and I don't think solo experiences are always bad, but I think where we are right now in as a society, people don't really know how to set up the right circumstances for a solo experience. So what's happening is things are rolling out as facilitated.
And what about legality? I'm just, I'm the son of a judge and things like that. So
yeah,
aren't a lot of these drugs, illegal or controlled substances?
Yeah, totally. Oregon's rolling out the first legal psilocybin assisted psychotherapy, or psilocybin facilitated framework. So basically you can get treatment with psilocybin in a licensed facility. That's totally legal in the state of Oregon now, and we're one of 6 organizations in the country training people to do that. There's a lot of states that have decriminalized psychedelics. That doesn't mean they're legal. It just means that it's like lowest priority by the law enforcement. So we can't, like as medical people, we can't do anything with decrim. But better not to go to jail if you get caught. And then there's a lot of federal stuff going on. So MAPS just reached the end of its final phase 3 patient, which 3 phases is how many you need to do to get approved for on a federal level for MDMA. So that's exciting. That will probably be available to prescribe within the next 2 years. And a lot of people do underground or illegal use, and I think like right now there's not too many places that are really cracking down on it. It's not what we can't really interface with that as a medical clinic.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've traveled a lot of different places since teenager, and I'm curious, what's the kind of most surprising place you found yourself, whether it's a location or engaging with a person that your younger self was like, I can't believe that I was here, or I can't believe I was talking with this person.
Let's see. I mean, I think the place that the two places I think about a lot are my trip to India and Nepal and Tibet when I was 18, just like that I got the chance to go to Tibet when there wasn't a train, there wasn't a highway. You had to go over land. It was bumpy. There was, now you go and there's just like Chinese signs everywhere, but it was really before the mass push to get more Han Chinese to Tibet had happened. I'm just really grateful I saw that and I talked to Tibetans and it's weird to use the colonizer language to talk to them, but I feel like for many people along my route from Nepal to Lhasa, I was able to talk to them, and they'll probably never get a chance to talk to a Westerner again because most people don't speak Tibetan. And now there's just so much oversight of like any conversations that happen. So just like really learning what that occupation was like and what it was like for their lives. One person said to me, he was like, I know we look like we're happy because we have our belief system, but we're not free. And I need you to tell people like, we are not free here. As an 18-year-old, I was like, oh my God. Okay. So that, I think that does stay in my mind as something I'd like to continue we're working on some ways of using psychedelics to help treat trauma in Tibetan refugee populations. So I'm very excited about that because it's sort of been on my life plan since I was 18, to really give back and and Cuba. I think under Castro, I think that's an opportunity it was just once in a lifetime. Same thing, just talking to people, seeing what it was like to have him on the TV and just understand how that worked.
So as I read your bio and mentioned all these incredible universities you studied at and the kind of path that you've taken in terms of being able to pursue medicine in a way and help lots of people. Most people would say you're successful. How would you define success for you?
That's a great question. Yeah, it's interesting because I have this piece about getting diagnosed with dyslexia. It's 7 pages long, and I've been talking to Tom Schroeder, who wrote Acid Test. He's helping me edit it to then submit it, and he's like, we could submit it to New Yorker, Atlantic, this would get published, but he's like, I need you to be like more honest about how shit went down. I was like, that just like the actual real life experience of asking for like very minor accommodations and how it gets received, and how much shame is wrapped up in having dyslexia and ADHD. It's like it's so much that even it's like I was like, I don't know if I can even do that. I might need help because I feel like I get a mental block when I'm it's a really great piece, but there's like parts that just aren't filled in, the details. And he's like, I mean, the great part is you wrote this 8 years ago and you're a success story. You can say like fuck the system, I succeeded, and I was like, did I? And I was like, I mean, did I? Like it still doesn't get rid of that shame of people might know how my mind works and how much help I need for like really simple tasks sometimes. And then I can do these really big things. I can think of these big like system changes, but then someone tells me to like read this and it takes me twice as long, and they're like, why are you not scrolling? Are you not done yet? And it's like, like, why are you pushing me to read too fast? I read like half the speed of an 8th grader. I think success, I've had a lot of thinking over the last couple months about I think the work I'm doing now really feels like my calling. It's like all of my patients are now getting me Christmas presents. Like yesterday I got a Christmas present from one of my patient's sister, who was like, my brother hasn't, I haven't seen my brother's, been gone since his trauma. And now he's back to like the innocent, like happy kid he was when he was 9. And I was like, oh my God, gave me this huge box of chocolates. It's like 100 chocolates. I was like, okay. I was like, I've never gotten Christmas presents like this before. Was I ever helping anyone before? Maybe not. But
is that the key, the impact, the helping people? That's what I'm hearing.
I think so. But I also think it's like being in right relationship to that healing. And I think I've just recently come into this like understanding that you can be a really good healer and you can do really good work, but not necessarily be in right relationship with that healing. Like you can work too much or like over attached to that idea. And I think that like once my dad's trauma started getting released, I could see how much I've been a product of intergenerational trauma in a way that it's like there's a sense of like there isn't safety in the world, and like you have to just keep building and building because no one's going to catch you if you fall. And that's not really true because my parents would catch me, but that's the world they lived in, that it's like you got to keep doing it. And so I'm just noticing how much there has been like a part of my drive has been trauma informed almost in a way that's like, it worked. I am successful, but that I think the success is when you can balance that with like doing art and like, writing and being creative and spending more time with your family. So like having a successful career in which you really feel like you're making an impact, but also having that time. And I've just realized now how important it is to embody that. Because I'm training so many people, and if I'm not embodying that, I'm not going to be like radiating the right energy of what it should look like. So it feels urgent to just be like, I need to show what balance looks like because I'm pulling all these people out of the healthcare system that they're burned out and they're like frontline COVID people and they're like, and like you have to help them find their healthy place so that they can then hold the space,
Yeah, I think that's, I think a lot of us struggle who are driven to succeed. Success is not just about the professional, but it's about balancing the personal and having them kind of, as you said, I like the idea of balance. This I always find this interesting. You're doing a lot of things to try and help people. What inspired you to do that?
I don't know. I think it's just like innate. Maybe traveling at a young age and seeing that there are people that are born, like seeing the privilege of being born in this country. I think in New Hampshire, growing up, I saw my parents, how hard they worked. And I was like, wow, they've come into success because they worked so hard and they didn't start with anything. But then you see people in other countries like Brazil that are working just as hard and there's nothing there. There are no resources, and so I just realized, oh my God, I really am privileged. Like I am a white person in the richest country in the world with like the most opportunities. I speak English, I have loving parents. And yeah, there's stuff that's also hard. Being dyslexic is hard. Having ADHD is hard. Having a dad with sexual trauma is hard. But like I realized I could use the tools, and a lot of people don't have that opportunity, even though they might want it just as bad. So I think that launched a drive to just actually utilize the tools of privilege that I have at my disposal. Yeah.
And what do you think is the next kind of trend, if there is such a thing, in psychedelic science and therapy? Where do you think you said, the stigma's kind of going. So where do you think things are headed?
I think there's gonna be a lot of healing. I can't believe I can go into work and day after day see people that have treatment resistant depression or suicidality that they've had since they were a kid and then not have it anymore permanently. It's like, how do I just be in this position? I get to witness it. And yes, I'm doing good work, but it's like, now I have tools that actually work. And I didn't have that before. So I think on a micro level, there's going to be a lot of healing. On a macro level, I think we have to work really hard not to let the what John Dennis calls the psychedelic industrial complex, which I love. Not let the psychedelic industrial complex take over. So it's just seeing how capitalism comes in and starts making people cut corners. I was really lucky that I had people that were willing to like give me a loan for the building, and that, you know, without too many strings attached. And I've been able to stay very independent. We don't have any investors, so we have no one saying like, oh, you're doing 4-hour ketamine sessions, why don't you do 3 or even 2?
Right.
Some people are doing 2 now, and you know where that comes from. It comes from someone's behind it being like putting into the calculator, like how many patients times how many rooms times how many hours in the day times, you know, equals $3 million. Like you could be making 3 rather than $2 million. Like, what is happening? So I think we have like we have 2 therapists almost at every session, because I think it creates even better container for people. We do 4-hour sessions, not 2 or 3. We just, you know, it's not like the best way to make money, but it's the best way to heal someone. So I think that I think we have to work together to make sure that it stays in integrity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're gonna jump to rapid-ish fire questions. First one, if a movie was made about your life, can you think of someone you might want to play you?
I really have no idea the answer to this question. Oh my God. Even if I
Meryl
did,
Streep, she can do
I couldn't even think of the person's name. I have people in mind, but like I'm dyslexic. It's like I have leaky phonemes in my brain, so it's like I don't know those people's names.
Well, leave it to the casting directors.
I'll have to think about that one. I feel like I'd want it to be like Johnny Depp or something. I know that he's been doing like really messed up stuff recently, but I feel like he's
super talented.
I feel like he could embody something. I don't even know, you know, I don't even know if the person would look like me, but just like could embody the aspect of Dr. Hannah. This is a very brief tangent, but when I was in med school, Brown Medical School after the second year, they give everyone awards. Some of them are jokes and some of them are like more serious, like most likely to help the most people or most likely to, you know, become I don't know. Funny things. Right. But so they left mine to last, and they were like, we didn't even know what to do with this one. So we just brought everyone in, had a group contemplation of all the medical school teachers, and we decided all we can do is just call the award what it is. And so we're gonna award the Hannah McLane Award to Hannah McLane, and everyone just started laughing. And I my face turned red. I put my hood up. I was just like, "What does that even mean?" And they're like, "Hannah, you don't go to class. You're mentoring other people in how to skip class in med school." You know, because I was like, you can listen to everything at twice the speed 2 times for the same amount of time. And it's like I was just doing weird stuff with my studying. I was going to Jamaica and studying for my like exams on the beach with my Rastafarian friends. They were just like, we just don't even know what is going on, you know. So
I love that. Should stories always have happy endings?
No, I don't think so. No.
Do you have a favorite emoji?
You know what's funny? I have a person on my team who does like admin, and he always does so funny on Slack. He'll do the eyes going sideways, and he was trying to say like, I saw it, check. I looked at your message, and I kept for months. I thought he was being like, not it, you know, like I'm not. And I was like, Justin, like, I know you don't. He's like, oh no, that's not at all what I meant. But I just like it was like, I don't know what you're
danger
talking about.
Of emoji communication.
I do think like dyslexic people, you know, I don't know, but I feel like I often misunderstand emojis, and so I'm like reading it totally different than what the person's trying to say. I do a lot of like the one with the eyes, tears coming out of the eyes is nice. Like funny.
Can you name a favorite song?
I'm gonna name a favorite genre, which is
sure.
Like old school Brazilian music, like Tom Zé, nice. Clara Nunes. Like really, I've just been listening to all the old like Brazilian jazz. I used to go digging in like Bahia with my friend for old records, like Brazilian jazz records that they're not even digitalized. It's like, oh my God, right. It's so amazing. Yeah.
Love it. I'll have to try and find some on YouTube, maybe. Can you name a book that left a lasting impression on you?
Siddhartha by Herman Hesse, one of my favorite books.
Can
You
you
can
name
read it.
one of
You
your,
can read it in a day. I can even read it in a day, maybe 2 days. So everyone should read that. It's a really good book.
um, can you name one of your favorite movies?
Um, I would say that my two movies come to mind are The Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind and Labyrinth, which I've watched 1,000 times since I was in third grade, because David Bowie is so hot.
What's one thing you can't live without?
What's one thing these are real questions, huh?
Oh no, rapid fire is not the way to characterize them.
One thing I can't live without, I'd probably say like a bathtub. I love baths.
I like that. And if you could be credited with inventing something, what would it be?
Oh, I have a lot of things. I like to take credit. I like to take the credit for the following terms: psychedelic urgency, made that one up.
Love it.
Psychedelic famous comes from Courtney on my team. She's like, "Oh, everyone wants to be psychedelic famous these days." Psychedelic ecosystem and facilitator being used, and now I think I was the first one to start using those terms. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things over the years that I've helped come up with.
Oh, it's interesting. That question usually is about things that people haven't invented. You're actually giving us things that you have.
Yeah, totally.
I love that. Well, listen, thank you so much. Is there anything, if people want to know more about what you're doing and the work, is there anything you want to share? What's the best place for people to kind of find you and learn more?
Yeah, so you can go to soundmind.center or you can Google Soundmind Institute for our training program. If you email info@soundmind.institute, you can get me. Yeah, you can check out all of our programming online. I give a lot of talks. There's a lot of free webinars that I've done online. I like to make sure there are free things for everyone if they can't afford our year-long course. There's lots of free stuff you can get. And yeah, I'm sure I'll be doing lots more interviews in the coming months and years too. So thanks.
Well, I'm very thankful that you did this interview. I really appreciate your time, hearing your story. It's been really interesting and fascinating. And most of all, I want to thank you for helping us connect the dots.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Love it.
Thank you for taking your time to listen to this podcast. Please subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss any future episodes. If you could also do me a favor and please leave a review on iTunes, I would really appreciate that. Remember, story matters and is the best way to connect the dots.